circle that met together and we read the book Relationship Rich Education, which learning circles are things you can sign up for through Empowering Teaching Excellence. They're on different topics, different books. And I want to share a line from this particular book we read. It's called Relationship Rich Education is the book, and we'll have a link at the end of our presentation to the book, to USU's library if you're interested in reading the book. But this sentence that we read, or these two sentences from this book, college and university faculty and staff, through their own efforts, can create meaningful and exemplary practices that foster relationships on campus. Simple but important decisions range from holding office hours in places that are welcoming to students to deliberately engaging students when walking in the hallways or across campus. Now, in our learning circle, we got to this part of the book where it was talking about these really small, simple, easy things that you can do as an instructor to really connect with students and make rich relationships. Our discussion during this particular week about office hours was fantastic, and that's what actually spurred this proposal for this session, was what we got out of our conversation together. That's one of the cool things about ETE learning circles, is that sometimes the people that you're talking with and who are you're discussing with, they become a really rich resource and something that you learn from and you grow from, and it's definitely changed some of our practices. So I'm going to turn the time over to Jesse to tell us a little bit of the background about the 4 principles behind relationship rich education.
Awesome, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I'm Jesse Jones. I'm in the kinesiology and health science department. I get to chair the Outdoor Adventure Leadership program, and the book has 4 really awesome principles that I think also you'll see as we go through and talk connect to a lot of other things or other resources here on campus. The first one of the 4 is that awesome, genuine welcome and deep care. And we have things like orientations in place, a lot of really amazing events in the fall. Spring seems to get a little bit thin because everyone's so tired from doing all the fun stuff in the fall. The other part of it is really to inspire them, to connect and inspire in a way that's super fun. And in our department, we're trying to build a really cool alumni connection so that we can connect our students to alumni, and that's really been fun, as well as doing projects and faculty-staff interactions. We take all our students every spring to our main conference, try to get about 20 or 30 of them to go with us, and we find sponsors to help out with that. It's been a lot of fun. And number 3 is really emphasizing the idea that your network is your net worth. Meaning those who are around you, especially as you're going through, you want to develop an awesome web of interaction. And that starts with us as faculty. And so really kind of fun stuff going on with that. Clubs, organizations, getting them involved. Awesome stuff there. And last but not least, I see this especially from connections, is talking with them about the big questions in their lives. Because especially when students come in and they have those big emotions, those big feels, and you get to connect and have a lot of fun with that, it's really exploring, why are you here, what are you doing, where do you want to go with this? And it's a lot of fun, especially us being recreation folks. A lot of our kids get the question, hey, so what are you going to do for a living? Play your whole life? And we have to understand that, no, this is actually really an awesome career. And so going through that is kind of a fun thing. And so I'm going to hand off to Sarah again. She's going to kind of hit up the next little bit.
All right, this is just to give you a little overview of kind of the big picture ideas of what each of us will be sharing about office hours. So Carla, when we were having our big discussion, talked a lot about meeting students where they were at and her practices of connecting with students in spaces that they're comfortable and familiar with. Jesse is going to share a little bit more about using office hours as an opportunity to teach. He'll talk about meet the instructor type assignments and the ways those can be a great way to build relationships with students. Melissa has an un-office hours approach to office hours that she'll explain in more detail, along with couching it in the idea of supporting the whole student. And then I'll talk a little bit more about using office hours in online courses. So first, Carla.
All right, so I'm with biology, but I'm in blending. So we have non-traditional students as well as a lot of native students, so English isn't always their first language. They are also often first gen. So this is often so much, they don't have a role model. They don't have someone to say, go meet your professors. So you have to find creative ways. And one of the things I do is start an assignment. I create an assignment at the beginning of the semester, especially for incoming freshmen, that the assignment is to come to the office and meet me. I don't talk about content unless they have questions. I get to know them a little bit. I want to know some personal things about them, and I share things about myself. So I'm starting that relationship, right? It's really important to build that relationship. Another thing I like to do is teach them how to use that calendar scheduler in Canvas, because I utilize that for assignments or for group checkups or project checkups, paper checkups, things like that. They schedule the time and then come and meet. I also make sure I'm office hours that I'm live, prop my door wide open so they know whenever I'm in there and I'm not busy with something that I can be interrupted, it's okay. Leave the door wide open so they know they can pop their head in. I also turn Zoom on at the same time. They will sit in their dorm, which is just across the street, but they're more comfortable than walking over and coming into the office. So try and make yourself available. Secondly, the most important thing I think I do is meeting where they are, and that means I'll set up at the quad. I'll set up at the cafeteria, and I'll just sit there. And I'll have, students drop in. They have a question, but they're too intimidated or whatnot to come over to the office. So meet them where they are. I also hold brown bag little discussion sessions so that we can meet. I'll say, hey, I'm having my lunch over here. Bring your lunch, and we'll talk about things. That way I can get to know where they're lacking and where I might be able to help them. We also are fostering that relationship.
All right, one concept that was brought up in the book, and it was one of those things where you kind of hear ideas in a couple of places and so they start to stick because you've heard them multiple times. I had attended a syllabus constructing workshop last summer, and they talked about this idea as well, that think about what office hours might mean to a student who's never attended a university before. Does office hours sound like, oh, that professor is working, I had better not bother them? Or is it something that they understand to be, this is a time for you to come and meet me. This is really your hour. And so it really depends on how you present it at the beginning of the semester, right? You can talk about it different ways. Different things that, this was one that they suggested in the book, was calling it student hours. I've called them drop-in hours before, and I also offer pop-up hours before deadlines on assignments. And this is something, I do call this in my class, on my syllabus, it does say student hours. When I'm putting announcements on Canvas, I say student hours. That's what I call them in my classes. And so here's an example of some of the things that I do in online courses. I teach primarily online. I have weekly announcements that include the link to my Zoom room. They include a reminder of my phone number if people are more prone to call on the phone, and they remind of the time. So that's in every weekly announcement. I have a reminder about my Zoom hours, how to connect with me. There's also navigation in Canvas that you can have where it's just on the main home page, how to get to my Zoom, how to connect with me. Another thing I do, and Jesse will talk about it a little more, is having a meet the instructor assignment. That's something that I do in one of my classes as well. I link my students to a Calendly. I use Calendly for a scheduler, which is kind of nice because it can interact with Outlook so that you don't ever have double scheduling, which is great for me, and I really appreciate it. But I make sure that it's really easy for them to access me, find me, and I even have 1 week of the semester in that class where they're working on a project and I'm available to them. It's just a work week, no new content. My calendar is really wide open. I get really great student turnout during that week while they're working on their projects to come and connect with me and come and meet. And then the final thing that I do, and this has actually been one of the most successful things I've had in an online class, is a couple of hours before deadlines. In my class, I offer a pop-up hour of, this is a pop-up a pop-up student hour. I'm here to answer any questions. And it's one of those things where I went from having 0 students utilizing office hours in one of the classes I teach to having at least 5 students weekly show up to talk to me and ask me questions because they had questions right before an assignment was due. And instead of receiving a panicked email, we get to talk about it and talk through where they're at, where their understanding is, and get them through the assignment in a really successful way. Right.
Awesome.
I think it's Jesse.
Yeah, go.
It's like a revolving.
Gnawing at the bit already, aren't we? So for me, what it was is like my IDA scores were coming back a little wonky. And some of the comments about clear communication and those type of pieces were something that I needed to improve on. And so what I wanted to do is meet them where they're at, but more importantly, a lot of my students work 40 hours a week or more. And so it was almost impractical to have them come to office hours outside of class. And so I was in one ETE badge or something where they're talking about actually taking class time and using that as office hours. And that really, that keyed into me, that office hours as teaching. Because then I could sit with them on a one-on-one basis for hopefully about 15 minutes to go over everything that they wanted to go on. And I kind of expanded this, especially as we were reading this book a little bit more. But I had, basically, the idea was a meeting early in the semester and a meeting late in the semester with one of my classes, which was outdoor recreation management, where with them as a group, there's a lot of group work, there's also a lot of individual group work too. And so connecting into the 4 different principles was key to helping with this aspect. So with Welcome and Deep Care, I had made sure that when they came in, I had all their paperwork up, ready to go, so I could connect with them. Hey, here's where you're at. How are you feeling about this? What are some comments I can get back from you? And then connecting with them in terms of inspiring them to learn, because you could hear more about their story, like what are your blocks? What's keeping you from getting this done? How can I help you? How can I help you to stay on task? And a lot of students really responded positively to this because they knew they're going to have a second meeting later in the year where they're going to have to come back and give me some feedback about how they're doing. The other part was these significant relationships. We could talk about the group work and talk about, is there someone that they could connect elsewise in class to help them to form a different group? It was a lot of fun. And then, of course, exploring those big questions. Because outdoor recreation in Utah being very do-it-yourself, a lot of times you don't see the pathway to full-time employment. And I can sit there and walk through that. What does that look like? And how does this work connect to what you're trying to do as a whole? And so that was that. And my scores, I say that was the end game, and that helped out. But it really helped to connect with students at that deeper level, especially from the principles on the book.
Thank you, Jesse. Again, my name is Melissa Scheaffer. I was really feeling very confident about this presentation until Travis Thurston walked in the door. Thank you, Travis. So, I am faculty in engineering, and I teach engineers how to write their engineering. I know, struggle is real. And having taught on this campus for over 20 years, I was never more acutely aware of this concept of supporting the whole student than after the pandemic. It was like Pandora's box opened, and this groundswell of anxieties and stresses just were at the forefront of students. And I realized they were always there. They just somehow came to the surface a little more readily. I also realized that if I was going to reach students academically, I had to connect with the whole student, which meant also supporting them emotionally. Because as much as I want them to write their engineering, they can't learn that if they're full of stress and anxiety. So 2 things I started doing. Number 1 is I started paying attention to the small talk. You know, that chatter at the beginning of class? And if I heard for a couple of class sessions, oh, I can't believe we have that thermodynamics exam on Thursday. If I hear that enough, I realize that that's causing some stress and anxiety. And so I'll ask students, is anyone in favor of postponing the assignment for this class a couple of days? It's amazing. It's palpable. You can feel the stress level go down in the room. And it's not the end of the world if I postpone an assignment due date a couple of days. Theoretically, it should mean that the assignments are better, right? Because then they have more time to work on them. So this whole approach to faculty or to supporting the whole student is gaining a lot of traction lately. And it's this goal of supporting students both emotionally as well as academically. This first bit of research astounded me. Only 18% of students report that their emotional and mental health has not negatively impacted their academic performance. And a recent survey, really recent survey actually, revealed that Students would benefit. They wanted more additional or intentional professor engagement, and that they would benefit from professors being more accessible outside of class. Well, the obvious answer to that, right, is office hours. But here's the problem. I think office hours have run their course, at least how we used to view office hours. I create times, and they're on my syllabus. I did. I would wait expectantly in my office for students to come to my door, and guess what? Yeah, they didn't, and they didn't with my colleagues either. And I quickly realized that, one, students don't need us until they need us, right? But also, students' schedules are far busier than my schedule. I'm amazed at what students have to cram in 24 hours. So I instituted, oh, they were there, on office hours. I thought that transition was gone. You're not supposed to play with your PowerPoint presentation before you send it to the conference organizer. On office hours. This is a statement on my syllabus. Whenever you need help, have a question, or need information. Those are my office hours. And if I'm sitting in my office and a student comes to my door, I stop what I'm doing and I help them. The reality is it doesn't take most of the time, a lot of my time. Now, there's a caveat that I give students that is, if I'm getting ready to run to teach a class or go to a meeting, we might have to postpone that. But if that happens, I do two things. One, I triage the question or the need that the student has, and I don't let that student leave until we've made an appointment for them to come back and talk about whatever it is they need to talk about. And it's made a difference. All of these benefits have really, I've seen all of those. But I think what is the biggest indicator of success is that I'm seeing more students. And the word's getting around that I'm there to support the student, the whole student, rather than that narrow piece of technical writing. And supporting the whole student goes a long way in reaching them academically. Also, I wanted to bring up, there's a faculty approachability project that started in just about a year and a half ago at Rutgers University. Here's the web address. Loads of information about how to engage with students. Thank you.
All right, as I mentioned, one of the great things about an ETE learning circle is that often the people you're talking with, as you can tell, turn into an amazing, rich resource that you can use to improve your own teaching practice. What we want to do is extend that discussion here with you today. So we're going to ask that you get into groupings of maybe about 5 people together. And we, time-wise, we're hoping you can focus primarily on 2 questions. For sure, what works well for you? And then question 4, how can you use office hours to address one of the 4 points of relationship-rich education? We have a handout for you so that you have those 4 principles in front of you while you're discussing, as well as a place to take notes. What we would like you to do is give us your note sheet back at the end of the session, because on the last slide we have a link to a Google Doc where we'll include all of the notes and the ideas that you generated in this session today. So we'll hand out those handouts, and you can start talking about question 1, what works well for you, and question 4, how could you use office hours to address these points?
Does anyone like to start off, or do you want to be voluntold? Anyone like to go start?
I'll start.
There it is. Here, I'm going to have to hand this over to you, okay?
All right, so basically on what works well, just open access. So she did graphic arts and design, we do nursing, he does math. All sorts of disciplines. All disciplines. Sorry, math is not my favorite, but I love you to death. But we have such a variety of resources or concepts, businesses. Anyway, but open access works because, like your students work 40 hours a week. Our students work as well as go to school. You know, everybody lives life, and so open access is what works best. Are we just do number 1 first?
One type on that. That's awesome.
Perfect.
No, I have one of my neighbors. He's got a little sign on his door that says "open" or "away," and it tells them really easily if they're open at that time. It's really kind of fun. All right, moving on. Should we just move up the table here? All right.
Yeah, I think we kind of agreed that leaving things as they are, doing nothing, you're not going to get any better results. But we liked the idea of using it as an assignment. I think someone in our group has done that, and with success. And that students commented that almost forced meeting allowed them to get the help they needed that they otherwise wouldn't have sought out. We also talked about, let's see on the notes, just having group office hours if it's a large class, and maybe a lot of them have the same questions. So there's some things we came up with.
And with those forced meetings, having actual questions they need to come prepared with, it really helps that along a lot of the ways. All right, moving over here, you guys.
That should be me that I have the paper. Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Joanna. We have been talking first about what is working well for you to get idea from other colleagues. A couple of my colleagues from the group, they were mainly working in a lab setting, so they tend to have that office hours, and correct me if I'm wrong, like more in person because it's like more hands-on. We're also talking about they usually come to the office hours when they need to solve like practical questions, especially in big classes where maybe there are 100 people and they didn't realize about something and they come back to you in a one-to-one situation. We're also talking about giving the cell phone when it's a practical problem and they need to solve it right away. So one of our colleagues is pretty open to call me if you have a problem with the camera or multimedia, and we'll like work on it right now. Another thing we have been chatting a little bit is they usually tend to come to office hours when there is a deadline. If there is an assignment, 3 days before, 300 people comes. If there is an exam, it's happening the same. So we're discussing how to make people come slowly, so you're studying in a progress and not everything in a rush that it's going to be worst. And a great idea of one of my colleagues is that when it's a big project, to set up milestones and soft deadlines, so they are forced to come when they have a small deadline each time. This is about the first question. And about the last question, experience genuine, welcome, relationships are powerful, develop other relationships and challenge students. We feel that everything that has been working for us is helping also to that 4 points. Thank you.
I think we're getting one more last here. Graph, you get your group. Who wants to? There you are. You're looking excited about this.
Do you want to? Okay. Yeah, so I guess I'll highlight the thing that I liked a lot from our discussion. I really liked, so one of the things that we talked about not working was having like standardized set office hours. For the most part, it just seems like students don't generally show up for different reasons. And so a couple of our group talked about how they just have flexible times and flexible modalities. So like we can call, we can do Zoom, we can text or do like messaging or whatever. And so that's something that works, is just being flexible as to when to hold hours for students.
And do any of you all use any alternative forms of office hours? Like, I know I have one colleague who uses Discord to actually host office hours. They play a video game at the same time as having office hours. And I don't know what you guys all thought about that. I know we talked a little bit about that. Do you want to share a little bit about that for, like, you want me to go? Yeah, sure, we'll do that. Kind of your experiences over there in New York.
Yeah, I used to be a high-end tutor in New York City. That's the only way I afford living in New York City. And the first 20 minutes would be video game time with like 13 or 14-year-old, and it would like kind of showed them I was a real human. It also allowed them to beat me in something, which I think is always good for a 13 or 14-year-old. But then we kind of got to work, so it kind of gets down that kind of wall there. And we were joking. I have taught here. My wife said I couldn't set up video games in my office here, and I think I'm going to reevaluate that and never tell her I bought another Switch. So.
Well, that's where you write a grant for that, and you get that paid for and stuff like that. But as you can see, there's a lot of different ideas different modalities and super fun ways to connect with our students. And the idea is that talk with one another, see what's working, come to the conferences. ETE has some great ideas, and the learning circles are really good. If you haven't been, I think, are they still accepting I can't remember. I think so. Yeah. And so I know that we're going to have some notes that we'll put up and links to the library book, the book we had.